Bob here, Shopper Bob Customs. Hey, thanks for watching my videos. Thanks for subscribing if you're a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber, please contemplate doing that right now. Hit that subscribe button while you're out there. Hit the notification bell so you know when new videos pop up. Also, I like my videos. Like I say, I like to be liked. Anyway, and if you got a comment or a question, please leave it in the comments section. If you got a question, I try my best to get back to you ASAP on questions. And then if comments need a response, I'll respond to them as well. And if they don't need a response, sometimes I'll even like them. So, because I know you like to be liked too. Anyway, today I'm working on the 57 Chevy. Today's project is going to be replacing the steering box and the steering column. And so let me pause this and show you what we got going on. Okay, so I got the old box out and I couldn't really find the specs anywhere on which bolts were supposed to be in there. I knew that they were supposed to be fine thread carriage bolts. And the one ad where we bought these said they're supposed to be grade 5. And I don't know whether you can see that or not, but if you look real close, it's got the 3 little hash marks radiating out from the H in the center. So everything that I have seen indicates that these are grade 5 carriage bolts. Now, what that means is that grade 2 is just a standard steel bolt. Grade 5 is hardened on the outside, and grade 8 is hardened throughout. And I called our local supplier of bolts. They have just a huge selection of bolts. It's where we buy most of our bolting from. And they did not have grade 5 or grade 8 carriage bolts in a 3/8 fine. And this is the one place I found that actually advertised them as grade 8. And they do have the 3 dash marks, which would indicate, I'm sorry, they advertise it as grade 5. And it has the 3 hash marks, which would indicate that it is a grade 5 bolt. So I'm going to put these through the frame. I got it a little bit cleaned up, so I've got a good solid mounting surface. Gonna go slide these through and I'll be right back. Let me start by making a few comments about the Ford truck power steering box. First off, I would not recommend putting a Ford truck power steering box in your Part5 Chevy. But let's just say you look at this video and you go, hey, I think I want to put a 1971 or newer Ford truck steering box in my 55 or 57 Chevy. Fair enough. You can do what you want to do. I'm just saying don't. But the first thing that I would point out is that it has 3 mounting holes. Even though the bolts are bigger than the Tri-5 bolts, it still has 3 mounting holes, and it has them for a reason, and that's because 3 mounting points are solid, 2 mounting points it can rock fairly easily. And so the one thing that I would have done if I had done this would have been to come in here and weld a bracket to the frame rail that would accommodate that 3rd bolt. That's the reason they didn't put it in, was because it's just out there in space, and it would need to have a good stout bracket welded to the frame to make that bolt work. And if they'd have done it correctly, they would have done that, and they didn't. Okay. The second thing is the 55 through 57 bolts in the frame, they pass through the frame, but there is a tube inside the frame rail at each bolt hole that prevents the frame rail from collapsing when you tighten the bolts up. They didn't put tubes in the new bolt holes. They just drilled the holes, ran the bolts through, and started collapsing the frame rail where those bolts were. Now, it did tighten up, and fortunately there was no problem, but you got to understand something about that. Even if you get it tight when you're assembling, what's going to happen over time with you steering it back and forth, that movement, that pressure on that steering box is going to cause the frame rail to collapse further, and then the bolts will be loose, and then the steering box will be loose. that can lead to the frame rail collapsing, basically, letting the bolts get loose, letting the steering box get loose, and that could lead to catastrophic failure. So if you're going to be doing this kind of stuff, you need to make sure that you put spacer sleeves into the frame rail so that you don't collapse it, that you have a good solid purchase on both sides of the frame rail holding that steering box in place. This is nothing to fool around with. And if you're doing this kind of work and this is the way you're doing it, put down the tools and step away from the vehicle. Okay, so now what I've done is I've got the steering box set up here in place, and I'm going to start threading it through. I've got the bolts in there. Now, unlike the Ford box where the bolts actually thread into the housing, these holes are oversized so that the bolts pass through them, and you have nuts that go on the inside of the engine compartment to tighten those carriage bolts up. So the other thing that I've done is I've gone ahead and put my welding blanket over the front seat in the hopes that when I pass this through, if it does contact the seat, I don't poke a hole in the upholstery. It is protected by the welding blanket. So I'm going to attempt to thread this in there without damaging anything, and we'll see how this goes. Okay, so here it is mocked up. I did need, when I first put it in, tighten the nuts up, no lock washers, just snugging them up good and tight. The shaft went through that teardrop shaped hole pretty well offset to the passenger side, which kind of concerned me, and I got inside and I measured it, and sure enough, it was offset to the passenger side. And so I played around a little bit with 3/8 washers between the steering box and the frame. One on the top bolt and the bottom bolt on the front was too little, two was too much. I ended up putting one on each and then a 30-seconds alignment shim behind each one. And that centered it up really good. And so I think that'll be the way to go with it. I don't know whether that's because the frame is tweaked. You know, I ran into the problem with the motor mount on this side, or whether the body's tweaked. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but the thing is, the steering box is designed with 3 pads that hit the frame. It doesn't have a machine flat surface over the entire face of it, so by putting the washers and the shims in there, it's basically covering almost the full contact area that it was intended to contact. So, and it brought it within about a 30 seconds, and I'm not going to sweat a 30 seconds, which I'll get to in just a minute. Okay, so with the shaft centered in the dash, close enough. I mean, yeah, 30 seconds here or there. What I want to do is I want to make sure that I don't cut too much off the shaft. I've got to cut off enough to get the steering column in here, but I don't want to be in a situation where I've cut it off 3 times and it's still too short. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from a mark on this piece of masking tape to the shaft and identify it as best I can. The shaft is 3/4. The housing is 2 inches and about a 30 seconds, and that's 30 seconds I'm not going to pay attention to, because that's a 64th basically, and it's not. If I get within 30 seconds, I'm going to be happy. So basically, 3/4 from 2 inches is 1.25 inches. 5/8 is half of that. So basically the tube where it comes to the firewall here needs to be 5/8 of an inch taller than the shaft is right here. So I'm going to go ahead and put some marks in it, and then I'll be pulling the steering column out, or I'll be pulling the steering box out and putting the steering column in to see if I can't get it located correctly. So that should give me a ballpark of where the steering column needs to be, and then once I get the steering column installed, I'll know how far it's sticking out of the firewall, and I'll know where to cut this shaft. And I'm going to err on cutting it too long. Once again, I've cut it off 3 times and it's still too short. You don't want to be there. So with that, I'm not going to record removing the box. Save some music. Okay. Okay, so I have removed. This is what they had in there for the steering shaft to go through and also for the clutch rod to go through. We're going to have to come up with something better than this to seal off the engine compartment, but for now I'm going to toss that aside. I've got the steering column. The packaging that comes around the full length of the column, if you turn it on its side and wrap it around the top, it works out perfect, and tape it in there so that you don't scratch the part of the column that you're going to see. And then on the support bracket right here, I've got it slid down this way as far as possible. The idea being is that that's going to move this back into the passenger compartment as much as possible, which means this will be back as far as it possibly can from the steering box, which means that I won't have to worry about cutting it off too short. I might cut it off too long, but if I cut it off long 3 times, I'm going to be okay. If I cut it off short 3 times, it's not going to work. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead and install this lightly with the 2 bolts that hold it in place. Okay, so I've gone in to the passenger compartment and sat in the driver's seat, and I like where the column's at. It obviously is too far back towards the driver, but we'll compensate for that. It will need to slide this way a little bit, but right now I'm trying to get the shaft on the steering box as close as I possibly can to being long enough. Cut it off again if I need to, but I think I'm going to be able to get around that. We'll see how that works out. But for right now, I've got this strapped so that if I bring the tape down, I am right at 6 inches. And I've got a bolt stuck in there, pushing it over towards the driver's side a little bit, so I'm right at 2 inches. So basically, this area of the column right in here is concentric with the 3/4 shaft of the steering box. And so now what I'm going to do is measure from the top front bolt that the box mounts to. I'm just going to set the tape measure on that and come up to the bottom of the shaft. Actually, well, yeah, a little bit higher up. Well, let's see, what's it at the top? It's going to be easier to measure to the bottom. And I am at almost 8.5. So I think probably what I'll do is I'll probably cut the box. I'll take this measurement over to the box, measure up to it, and I'll probably cut it at 8 3/4. Let's go over to the box and see how that looks. Okay, so I come up from the hole, 8 3/4. That should be 1/4 long, and then it's about a 1/2 inch that I can slide the column down forward on it. So what I'm going to do is run a tape around that, and I will probably be sure and cut on this side of the tape. Like I said, I can always cut more off. Whew. Makes me nervous. I need to clean this end up just a wee bit, and on to the next bit of backyard machining that I've got to do. So I'm going to stop this and get set up for the next step, and I'll be right back. Okay, apparently I left it running. So what I've done is I've laid out what the double D is supposed to look like on a piece of tape. This hatched area is the D section. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and cut out the section that I'm going to leave the tape on the sides where the double D is, and I will cut out the sections that are to be removed. Okay, now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this and go get a wet rag to keep this cool. Okay. Okay, and it's my understanding that this is how I did it. Instructs people to do it with their column, because I watched the guy install an I did it column, and he actually had the instructions laid out on how to lay it out and do it. So the thing is, what I've got is a good snug fit, and that will lock in there really good. And I've also, I believe, I might have to do just a little bit of trimming right there to get it to slide into the steering column shaft. We shall see. Okay, so now I've got to prep the end of the steering column, and I forgot my hammer. Okay, so with that, the only thing I've got to really do on this is the final installation is to get the steering column inside the car positioned in the correct location. I may have to trim the steering box shaft to make that work, but maybe not. The thing is, it slides inside of the 1-inch double D that's in the steering column, and as long as it doesn't come up and interfere with these set screws up here on the 1-inch double D. All that's going to do is give it a little bit more stability. So what we've got here is a good solid joint, and what I'll have to do is I'll have to come in and figure out how I'm going to seal off the bottom of the column from the engine department. But like I said, right now I'm going to go ahead and get the centerlink put in. I've got that new centerlink, and I'm going to get it put in, and then probably call it a day. Okay, so with the center link taken apart, I've got the inner socket in place. This drops down over the pitman arm ball. And then in goes the outer socket. Big spring with the spacer plunger and the nut. Something a little different to get that tightened up. So what's left to do on this is I've got to pack the bearings for the idler arm, and then I've got to hook up the tie rod ends, and I've got to get this tightened up here, and that's just busy work. I'm not going to record it. I'm just going to try and get her done. When I come back on this video, I'll show you the final installation. Well, final installation of the steering mechanism. I still have to adjust the steering column and attach the box permanently. Okay, so I've got the steering assembled. Got the pitman arm and the center link adjusted. He may need to come back and adjust it after he puts some miles on it, but got that taken care of. Of course, got the bearing of the idler arm packed and got it assembled. I've torqued the bolts for the idler arm to the frame and to the steering box to the frame. I've got an issue that I'm not exactly sure whether it's just that this car is 60 years old or this is normal for 57 Chevys or what the deal is. But the way I set this up when I was getting ready to modify the shaft on the box, I turned it from stop to stop and figured where the midpoint was. And that's important because that's the spot where the sector and the gear have their closest tolerances. That way, when you're heading straight down the road, the steering wheel wants to stay heading straight down the road. As you deviate away from that, the clearances open up and makes it easier to turn, but it also makes it a little bit more sloppy. So you kind of want the steering input shaft to be centered, and to that end, I don't know whether you can see it or not. I don't think you can. At the factory, they marked on the housing where this wide spline was located at the midpoint. Now, this sector shaft only has 4 wide splines. There's 4 wide splines in the pitman arm, so you can only put this pitman arm on one of 4 ways, and the other 3 ways the car won't steer. So this is the only way that you could put this pitman arm on and have it steer. Well, with it set up like this, if you look at where this tie rod end is in relation to the control arm pivot, and you look at where this tie rod end is to the control arm pivot, it's all shifted over to the passenger side of the car, which makes this tie rod assembly short and this tie rod assembly long. And what I've done is I have actually gone about 3/16 of a turn past where I've determined the center of the box is, and to verify that, I am actually 1 spline off from where they say the center of the box is. So I don't know whether I've got some faulty parts or whether I've got here again, when I was trying to get the frame mounts for the motor mounts in, something is kind of funny here. Hey, if you've got a 57 Chevy and you've run across something like this, leave a comment. Let me know what you think's going on. I mean, I think it's going to be functional. 3/16 of a turn. I'm not happy with it, but I think we'll be okay with that. I'm not happy with the long tie rod here and the short one on the other side. But and I should have known when I took it apart. That's sort of the way it was as well. The driver's side was much longer than the passenger side when I went to set this up. So anyway, next thing I've got to do is I'm going to see if I can't get the steering shaft to go down on here further. I may have to trim this a little bit more to make that happen, because I would like to get the steering column down. So I'm going to try and get that done right now. All right, so I managed to bring the column down a little bit. I could probably still get about 1/4 inch, but I'm going to show you something here in a minute that I don't think that's the right way to go. Basically, I've got it blue Loctited together. It's all tight. Should be ready to run with that. Let me come around here and show you why I slid it down. Let me come around here and show you why I slid it down. Okay. So there is where the column is sitting. Let me get a light on this, see if I can get this a little bit better. In relation to the instrument cluster. However, what they've done is they have cut this off at an angle, and the way this is setting right now, the instrument cluster should be up into that sleeve of the column, and it's not, because of what they've done to modify it. And I mean, looking at it, I'm thinking, I don't know. It depends on whether the owner wants it to be right. I don't think he has the bottom trim piece. If he does, and it hasn't been modified, it'll slide up in there, and then you'll have that triangle gap. He really needs a new instrument cluster and a new, well, new, you can't get them new, but a correct instrument cluster and a correct under the column cover that will bring it up into the column cover here. But with that, everything's tight. It should be ready to go. And I may have to take the column out. Uh, I don't know because I've still got wiring to do behind the dash, and I've got a lot of wiring to do. But for right now, there we are. Okay, so I'm going to bring this to a close because basically I've got the front steering and the steering column ready to go, or at least it's to the point where he needs to make some decisions. And also, if any of you, like I said on the one part where I was showing you the tie rod end lengths and where the centerlink is sitting in the car, I sure would appreciate some input on that, because I mean, it's going to work, but I'm not really thrilled with it. Like I said, I don't have the pitman arm off a spline because it's got the wide splines. You can only put it on one of four ways, and only one of them will actually steer the car. The other puts the pitman arm at really an odd place. So it could be the wrong pitman arm, I don't know. Anyway, the next thing I'll be doing is I've got to get the brake lines rerouted around the steering box, because it's slightly different than the Ford steering box that was in it. And also I've got to get it rerouted because of the Willwood master cylinder and proportioning valve. And then after that, be putting the engine and transmission in. We've had kind of a delay on that because I'm waiting on a torque converter now, getting the correct torque converter for the 4L60E. And yeah, and then we've also got fuel injection. We've got the controller for the electronic transmission and converter. We've got MSD. We've got let's see, I said fuel injection. Yeah, I've also got to get all of the instruments hooked up with the control box for it. MSD unit, new gas tank. I'm probably going to be welding a new bung in the gas tank because he is using a frame mount. Fuel pump for the Holly Sniper. And we've been reading some things about maybe it's not the best idea to try and siphon the gas up and then back down to the fuel pump, that maybe having the pickup down at the bottom of the tank may be the best way to go. We're going to look into that. The truth of the matter is that it probably would be better with an in-tank pump, but right now, based on some things he's seen on the internet about the Holly Sniper, we may not leave it on. Time will tell. Anyway, we're getting close to getting this thing closer anyway. And so please keep watching, subscribe, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, like the video, and please comment. Ask me any questions. And like I said, if you got some input, I would sure appreciate it, because that steering just bugs me. Maybe it's the way it's supposed to be, but I don't like it. But other than getting a different pitman arm and trying it, I don't know what else to do. Anyway, so for now, Chopper Bob out.